All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a completely fascinating culinary journey into the Horn of Africa. We're going to look at how a microscopic sourdough yeast starter, literally just wild yeast and bacteria, has anchored an entire culture for centuries. And then we'll see how that ancient tradition is suddenly colliding with these massive cosmopolitan international menus. It's this incredible story of science, culture, and globalization, all told through the food on the plate. So I want you to start by asking yourself this. What if your plate, your utensil, and your tablecloth were all made out of the exact same delicious food? Seriously, imagine sitting down to a meal where the bread isn't just a side dish. It's actually serving every single functional purpose of the dining experience. And then, at the very end of the meal, you literally eat the tableware itself. I know, it sounds like absolute magic, right? But this is just the everyday reality of one of the world's most incredibly unique food cultures. And the absolute star of this functional dining experience is something called injera. If you haven't had it, it's this amazing, sour, fermented, almost pancake-like flatbread with a really distinct spongy texture. Traditionally, it relies entirely on a remarkable, tiny, ancient cereal crop native to Ethiopia called teff. They mill this teff into a superfine flour, knead it with water, and boom, you've got the absolute cornerstone of the dining process in Amhara society, and really all throughout Ethiopia and Eritrea. But here's where it gets really interesting. There's actually a whole fascinating economics behind the flour used to make injera. See, pure teff is pretty expensive to produce. So serving 100% pure teff injera, that's an actual status symbol. Plus, the teff seeds are graded by color. White teff, which is known as niche, is the absolute preferred choice. It's the most expensive, and high-income households definitely favor it. On the flip side, we've got blended injera. To make the bread a bit more economical, producers will often blend teff with cheaper flours, things like rice, sorghum, or maize. Now, rice flour keeps that nice, desirable white color. But here's the catch. It causes the bread to go stale way faster. It dramatically reduces the shelf life compared to the pure, highly flexible teff. So how is this masterpiece actually made? Well, the process is honestly a masterclass in the complex science of traditional fermentation. Step 1 involves adding this clear, yellow liquid starter called yirsho. They collect this from previous batches, and it is just packed with wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria. Then step 2 is a primary fermentation that takes anywhere from 24 to 72 hours. Gases rapidly form, really expanding the dough. Then comes a super crucial step. A portion of the dough is actually boiled with water to create this pre-gelatinized binder called absit. Without the absit, you just wouldn't get that signature spongy texture. Finally, step 4 is a secondary fermentation lasting up to 2 hours, which puffs the whole dough up with gas bubbles. And this whole process, it hinges on absolute sheer precision. The magic number to remember here is 46 degrees Celsius. When they make that boiled absit binder, the cook can't just toss it right back into the main dough immediately. No way. It has to cool down to exactly 46 degrees Celsius, which is about 115 degrees Fahrenheit, before it's added back in to trigger that vital secondary fermentation. If it's too hot, it kills the yeast. If it's too cold, the reaction just stalls out completely. It's literally artisanal chemistry at its finest. That intense scientific precision extends directly into the cooking process, too. Injera is baked on this really large, smooth, circular clay griddle called a mitot. The clay is heated perfectly to between 90 and 95 degrees Celsius. The cook pours the fermented batter in this rapid, sweeping spiral from the outside inwards, and then they cover it with a lid. And here's the crazy part. They never flip it. For 2 to 4 minutes, all that trapped steam forces starch gelatinization, which basically leavens the bread from the top down. This magical steam process forms these highly visible, airy bubbles all across the surface. Ethiopians beautifully call these bubbles the eyes of the injera. But the ultimate takeaway from this ancient method is that it creates an absolute nutritional powerhouse. Get this, teff is incredibly high in iron, so much so that frequent consumption of teff injera is associated with remarkably low rates of anemia. Plus, that long fermentation process means it's incredibly rich in prebiotics and probiotics. But even more amazingly, the fermentation actively breaks down phytic acid, which is an anti-nutrient, meaning your body can actually absorb all those rich minerals. Now, it is low in protein, sure, but it is just a brilliant example of how ancient food science can completely unlock a grain's potential. Once it's perfectly cooked and cooled, that's when the injera becomes the famous edible tablecloth. It's truly the ultimate shared cultural experience. They store it in this beautiful cylindrical straw basket called a mesope, and it immediately acts as both your serving platter and your utensil. You just tear off small pieces. Traditionally, you'd only use your right hand for this, and you use it to scoop up these hearty, incredibly flavorful stews called wats. And remember those bubbles, the eyes we just talked about? They serve a totally functional purpose. They act like little sponges, eagerly soaking up all those rich, spicy juices from the stews. When you see this translate into a traditional restaurant setting, take a place like Benabiba, for example, the menu is beautifully simple and incredibly localized. You've got hearty stews like shirota gabeno or roasted meat, tibs, running between 170 and 350 birr. They even have these totally ingenious dishes like injera firfir. That dish makes perfect use of leftovers by tossing dried, torn-up injera with a rich tomato sauce for just 150 birr. It's affordable, it's highly communal, and it's deeply rooted right in the local terroir.
But step inside the Ethiopian Skylight Hotel in Addis Ababa, and you are met with a completely different reality. I mean, talk about a visual shock. Look at the ultra-modern architectural lighting, those chic green leather booths, the massive, sprawling, industrial-style dining spaces. This is a huge shift. This is exactly what the new face of luxury dining looks like in Ethiopia's capital.
And that visual shock perfectly captures our next chapter, the global expansion. See, modern Ethiopian dining isn't just about preserving the past anymore. It is actively evolving into this sprawling, highly globalized experience that caters to a massive international audience. We're talking business travelers, luxury tourists, you name it. The menus in these spaces are undergoing this radical transformation, seamlessly blending those ancient culinary traditions right alongside cosmopolitan tastes. The result of all this is a pretty staggering dichotomy right there on a single menu. For instance, at the Skylight Hotel, you can order a traditional mixed combo tibs, which is seared beef, chicken, and lamb served up with injera and awaze sauce. And that sits at a premium 2,950 Ethiopian birr. But right next to it, you can order crispy fish tacos. Or how about a massive 800-gram dry-aged American tomahawk steak with truffle butter for 3,650 birr? It's wild. You essentially have an American steakhouse, a global fusion joint, and a traditional Ethiopian kitchen, all operating simultaneously under one roof. And this seamless integration of global influences, it extends right through to the dessert course. Literally sitting in the heart of the Horn of Africa, you can take a full-blown global pastry tour. We're talking Austrian sacher tortas and rich espresso-soaked Italian tiramisu running up to 4,500 birr, right alongside delicate French opera cakes. The sheer international variety available there today is, honestly, just staggering. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. We've looked at the meticulously crafted 72-hour fermented teff injera, a bread that literally represents centuries of communal dining and deep cultural heritage. And we've also just seen the explosive cosmopolitan global fusion feasts now available in those very same cities. So, my question to you is this. If you were sitting down at a table in Addis Ababa tonight, would you reach for the ancient, time-tested staple, or would you dive right into the modern fusion feast? Well, whichever you choose, the Ethiopian culinary journey proves to be a spectacular intersection of history and modernity. Thanks so much for joining me to learn about this today, and as always, stay curious.